Okay, so today I am absolutely over the moon to be joined by Cheryl R Riley. Cheryl is an artist, furniture designer, and art advisor whose focus is artists of the Black African diaspora. She is known for creating amazing wall art, stunning installations, amazing public artworks, and she's a member of the BADG, the Black Artists and Designers Guild, founded by artist and designer Marlena Barnett. So Cheryl, I met I think 16 years ago when I was working in New York on a documentary about extraordinary designers and their clients, and Cheryl came into my orbit, and I just thought she was stunning and talented and inspirational. And just a little bit more about Cheryl. She's sort of exhibited in over 60 group and solo shows throughout the US. Her public art projects are installed in New York City, San Francisco, Sacramento, and Atlanta's Hartsfield International Airport. Her furniture designs are owned by some of the wealthiest and most tasteful Hollywood stars and New York stars in private collections, as well as featured in museums, including two Smithsonians and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. So, welcome to the Fast Track to Fearless podcast, Cheryl. I am delighted to have you here.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm delighted to be with you and to see you again. And I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you across the ocean.
I'm so happy to have you. So, Cheryl, I always wanted you to be on this podcast. And if you remember, when I did my Women Who Inspire Me page on my website, you were the very first woman I put up there. And even though we met 16 years ago, and you now live in New York, and I now live in London, you've always been a symbol for me of female strength, creativity, um, uh, and fearlessness, in your art and your opinion. You're somebody to me that always felt very, very confident in your own skin and confident to express yourself. And a lot of this podcast is really about that confidence and fearlessness to be yourself. So what I want to ask you is, where did that all begin? As a child or a teenager, were you like that?
I don't even feel that I'm completely like that now. So I think that it's a facade that I've been able to project. I have a lot of self doubt and I criticize myself tremendously. But the evidence is the opposite because I think that I never let up on myself. I'm always pushing to achieve more, and maybe that's why I come off that way. But inside, I always feel I think I'm lacking something or I could have done it better when I look back at things. So I think I'm a perfectionist and more so toward myself than I am toward everyone else in my life. Everyone else can make mistakes. Everyone else can do things wrong. And I give them all kinds of like encouragement and that, oh no, that wasn't bad at all, you're too self-critical. I think I'm pretty critical of myself. So I'm never
Yeah.
completely pleased, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that makes me constantly work at being the best and better and trying to learn from mistakes and learn from things when I feel that I've disappointed myself.
But I mean, yeah, I think probably a lot of perfectionists are really, there's a value which is linked to excellence and wanting to really deliver excellent work. But for somebody who has so many proven accolades and very visible accolades, very visible acclaim. It's surprising that you would have so much self-criticism.
I know, it's crazy. It is definitely something I maybe should see a therapist about, because as I listen to you say those things, I think, well, anybody should be happy with that. But all I'm thinking about is what I haven't done. Like, I don't have an MFA. I don't, like, I just I'll never be happy with myself. And I would never allow my friends to behave like that toward themselves. Are you kidding? What do you mean? You're great. You do this, but I'm not my best cheerleader, unfortunately. But I'm fortunate that I have cheerleaders, and they kind of make me stop being so self-critical. But maybe that's why I am in 60 museums, is because I am so determined to do the best and to be good at what I do.
Yeah, so it's sort of like a fuel to you. But tell me what you were like as what was the child version of Cheryl like? Did you always have a plan?
No, I mean, I had thoughts about things, but I grew up in the South, in Texas, in Houston, Texas, and unfortunately, Texas is one of the more racist cities, country, states in America. In the South, they are actually the place that has a lot of control over what goes into textbooks, because they buy so many. um, and there were things that I excelled a lot in, school, but the schools were very segregated, and the propaganda was always that Caucasians were superior in every way. But you had no way to evaluate that, because everything was so segregated. And I think my mother was aware of that. And at some point in high school, I believe, in the summer, one summer, she enrolled me in some classes at Rice University, which is a really prestigious university in Texas. They had a summer program. And when I was in the room with other white people, it was very clear that I was adequate. And so that continued in my life when I went to, we didn't have a guidance counselor at my school. My father, where he grew up in Texas, there was no school to go to for a Black person after sixth grade. So he wasn't a lot of help for me in that way. My mother had a nervous breakdown at some point, and so she kind of disappeared, but she was from a family that was educated. All of my aunts have college degrees, and almost all of them. One or two did not, but they had their own businesses. And but I just didn't have as much exposure with them. So I didn't pick the right school. But I ended up in the dorm that was the oldest dorm on the campus. I had pretty much a full academic scholarship, and I was the only African American that had chosen that dorm. All the other Black kids went to the dorm that was the most modern and the newest building. But again, guess what? I was the only person in my dorm that made the dean's list. And but unfortunately, that caused the I don't know, I must have been a conversation for the professors, because after that, they started downgrading me as far as my grades. I still graduated with a good grade point average, but I no longer got the types of grades that I was getting at first. But it just, you didn't expect to be treated fairly, so that fortunately or unfortunately was an advantage. So you kind of just knew that you had to be of excellence, and this was how I was raised, about being of excellence and doing better than what is expected of you, being a what we call uh, being a good representation for your race, was how I was raised. So, unfortunately, race was a big issue being brought up in the South.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. And so, So definitely a sort of just a very tangible obstacle for you in terms of career aspirations.
And, we as
Um,
women know that too. I mean, there's also sexism, so that you're dealing with,
yes.
I call it the double whack pack.
And Cheryl, did you always know that you wanted to be an artist?
I was always creative, and my mother actually was an artist. And when I was very young, went back to Texas Southern University to try to complete her art degree. And I can remember seeing her sculpture projects she brought home, getting into her oil paints, which drove her crazy because oil paint was expensive. And I knew I could tell my mother was a really talented person, even as a child. It was very clear. Even our house, the way she decorated it, where everyone else went to Sears or some Sears and Roebuck's or some department store and bought a complete matching set of French Provincial or early American or something like that, set suites of furniture. But no, my mother designed our sofa and picked the fabric and had it upholstered in that. And we had Italian black marble tables, but she mixed that with Chinese cabinets. I mean, our place was, it could have been in a home decor magazine, quite honestly.
Mm,
She's super sophisticated, and as I got older, I learned that my grandfather was her dad was he was a carpenter and contractor, but he also did interior decoration for his clients, and all of his clients were Caucasian, and they were in Shreveport, Louisiana. So she grew up, surrounded by quality and taste, and
yeah.
so
So
I
it's in
think
your
that
it sounds like it's in your DNA then,
it
because
is in
actually
my
when I've
DNA.
seen when I've seen photograph, you have a lovely Instagram page which we'll put up the details of. But when you frequently show pictures of your well when you were little and your childhood, and everybody is always dressed so beautifully and beautiful dresses and very very stylish.
Yeah, well, I think African Americans are noted for that. Being about looking good. And I think that was a ego booster, that you're clean, you're sharp, and despite how the larger culture portrays you, you're the one. And it was very distressful, I know, for a lot of older African Americans when they started seeing the younger people wearing their hip hop kind of and their clothes hanging off their butts and all of that stuff. But guess what? That's turned out to be popular style for everybody now. Everyone's wearing athletic wear all the time, or
Yes.
we are imitated in fashion and style, and basketball players here are the style setters, trendsetters almost. I mean, it's really funny. We do. I think a lot of American culture is generated from the Black community.
Mm, absolutely. And so, did you, the fact that you wanted to be an artist or pursue a career in design and art, was that supported by your family then? Or it wasn't like, because there are a lot of like in the South Asian culture, etc. It's like, no, no, I want you to be like a lawyer or, that kind of stereotypical
A
parents.
doctor,
But so,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, what about
Oh, yeah,
yours?
the way well, you could see how much I love to talk, right? I talk over you and everything. So everybody in my family, and I could memorize whole chapters of books and things like that. So my family thought for sure I should have been an attorney. But I had a bad opinion of attorneys. And no one ever said anything nice about lawyers. And I didn't really want to have a job where nobody liked you. And no one seems to, lawyers, it's an honorable profession, I'm sure, but it wasn't something that I was drawn to. And having been the art background of my family, I mean, right away, one of my aunts had a grocery store, and I would work in the store before school and after school. And her supplier was a Jewish man. And one day, I was there drawing when he came in to get her orders, and he was like, "Wow, you can draw," and so I drew him and profile I think I did of him, and he gave me money for to buy that, and that was like, wow, I can get paid for my work. And it just took off from there. At school, I was the person who illustrated and laid out our yearbooks. Uh, when I got in high school, our little social club, the girls' social club, they decided I would pick the pattern that our uniforms would be in the fabrics, and they had me redesign the logo. In college, I made money on the side by doing illustrations for the clothing stores in town, and so I realized that despite what my family said and their objections to my being an artist, that I could thrive in that world. But it was a psychological obstacle for me as I really became more knowledgeable about art that I didn't have an MFA. But as you've said with your introduction, if I can't be okay with where I am by now, God help me. Because, yeah, I mean, how many people can say that they're in two Smithsonian Museum collections? You know, it's like kind of crazy. At this point, I'm being a little psychotic if I'm not accepting that I'm okay. It's okay. I'm all right. I
You're
support
more than
myself.
all right.
Yeah, I pretty much
Yeah.
support myself doing my art, and guess what? I'm still modeling too. I do uh, advertising, print ads all the time. I get calls, and I've been in one. I was in one commercial that was on the TV every morning for like 2 years.
That's right. I'd forgotten that you're a model as well. I'm not surprised whatsoever. Yeah, and I should imagine that will go on, for the next 30 years,
It's
40
like
years or
crazy.
whatever.
Yeah, in my life, it's serendipity all the time. So I'm going to the bank with our dog, she's a Chow Chow, and I don't know if you know that breed, but they are just
Yeah.
gorgeous, although they hate everybody. And
Yeah.
these there was some people at the bank who were looking for actual customers that they wanted to feature in ads, and they asked me if I would be up for it, and of course they were paying me, so of course I said yes. And they put me in this ad, like a black and white print ad that they only had in statement stuffers, I think, at first, and then that seemed to get a lot of traction. So then they put me in a newspaper ad, and then it was in magazines, and then it was in all of New York, and then it was all of the East Coast, and it just like they had told me it would only be for 6 months. It ended up going on for 3 years, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger till I go to the ATM and my face pops up on the ATM. I almost had a heart attack. And then I walked outside the bank the next day, and they had put me in all of the windows. So from there, it's been this thing. I just get, so I thought, who am I to deny this? I want the funds to come in. It's good to have more than one income stream. And all
Yeah.
it takes is I go for a day, and all these people are making a big fuss over me, and I learn makeup tips and stuff from the makeup people. And sometimes they give me clothes, and so it's like it's fun, and I get paid a nice amount. And now with the COVID, I'm actually they're re-upping some of my ads, because I'm getting older, and I don't know how much longer this will go, but because of COVID, that's the upside for me. They're just re-signing my ads and sending me another check.
That's wonderful. I mean, there's so many points in there, but let's talk about, because this is about being fearless, and I think a lot of that can be about how you present yourself and the kind of impact that you have on other people. And you strike me as somebody who's very bold in and fearless in the way you choose to present yourself. You always have been. So, can you talk to me a little bit about how you go about deciding how to present yourself?
Well, I think I'm just authentic. My mother was highly fashionable, and as you said, when you see the pictures of my family, I think that that is something that is, uh, pretty much standard in most Black middle class in all of the Black culture. I mean, we are really the style and fashion setters of pretty much the world. Uh, Especially African Americans, I think, do have a lot of influence on fashion. And it's really been a joy for me to see how many of the models now in the major publications are Black, because when I was growing up, that wasn't the case. So I think what I do is I try to be fully self-expressed as who I am as I present myself in the world. And other people see that and are drawn to that and find ways to utilize it. And I'm open, especially when I moved to San Francisco, I had this whole cohort of gay men. Well, I was their Barbie doll. And Halloween, oh my god, Halloween? Oh, yeah, the things that they would do, and how they would dress me. I mean, I can remember one Halloween, only one breast was covered. I mean, and we're out in the street. I mean, and black lipstick, before black lipstick ever happened, I think they must have used mascara or something. I mean, I just kind of give myself over to things that come to me, the opportunities that show up. And so that made me comfortable with the camera, because my dad took a lot of pictures of me as a child. And I think that that's what it is for a lot of people, the shyness about being shot and how you're going to look. But my feeling is they're taking 20 pictures and they're going to pick the best one, you know? So,
Yeah,
um, I just,
yeah,
the things that were disadvantages when I was younger, growing up in Texas, my being so skinny was something that people made fun of, but it's turned out to be a good thing, even health wise, to be thinner as I've gotten older. And then I went through a period where I blew up because I didn't realize I was gluten intolerant. And so I had to change my diet. And as soon as I dropped flour and things like that out of my diet, I went right back down to my normal weight. So there are just so many different things. Living in San Francisco was a great advantage because food was number one important, farm to table. And like I said, I kind of grew up like that. So I naturally was drawn to that way of eating fresh foods and having a diet that was more loaded toward fruits and vegetables than it was toward meat, more fish
yeah,
than beef,
yeah,
things like that. And I think that that's had an effect on me as I've aged, to
yeah,
make, I
yeah.
think being healthy is what's beautiful. Like, you clearly are a healthy person. You're very beautiful. I think beauty is really a reflection of health.
Interesting. Yeah. So, and what about the kind of how much does your ability to express yourself creatively um, come into that sort of fearlessness?
I think that I'm not really approaching things as fearless. It's more I'm compelled. I don't really almost have a choice. I I just do these things even when I'm not being paid to do them, and then I end up getting paid later. So, like I said, the boys, I let them dress me any kind of way, and that made me comfortable with being dressed in really weird ways. And then I ended up modeling. I'm a real bookworm, um, and so that expanded my knowledge of other cultures, even though I hadn't traveled very much. I traveled a lot in books. My work study grant in college allowed me to be work in the library. I asked to work in the library. I'm in heaven. I literally almost get turned on around books. Literally, I could read before I went to school, before I could write. before I knew my alphabet. I learned how to read, and so I'm just I a lot of my experience of life in the world, sometimes good and bad, comes from books, novels, or
Mm.
science books, or anything, and magazines. So that's what opened up the world to me. I didn't get to travel a lot, but uh, I was able to travel everywhere and even in other dimensions. Scientific. I was a sci-fi fan. That was not a big thing with black kids. When I came to school, all excited about Star Trek, again, they were like, "You are the weirdest thing." But so many things that made me weird as a child are actually an advantage and what makes me cool as an adult, which is really funny.
Well, well, of course, Star Trek was like it was very sort of interracial, wasn't it? Or Star Trek, it was very sort of diverse and inclusive, and uh, yeah. So it's funny. But I wanted to ask. I pick up on something that you said. So you're an artist, and you've made a good living out of being an artist. And there are many artists that don't sell a thing, and a lot of artists that don't sell a thing until they've passed. And you also mentioned it's good to have different revenue streams. What have been your attitudes to making money, as a self-made woman, self-made entrepreneur and artist?
It's I think it's primarily primary to um, you can't buy your art supplies if you don't have any money. And I think that artists are undervalued a lot of times. And then after they die, look at Van Gogh, right? Never sold a thing his whole life. And if anything of his comes up for auction now, it breaks a record every time. It's the same painting. It's just a different time, right? So I actually, I rarely will. I will give away some things sometimes to someone who really deserves it, but I think it is a matter of principle that I be paid for what I do, and that was that first lesson I got when I drew our supplier at my aunt's grocery store. I think that artists are the most important people practically in any culture and society. Almost everything we know about Florence in the 15th century is from the art that was painted at that time or the architecture that was built, right? So I even books that are put together, look at the bindings and the covers of the older books and how beautifully they're illustrated and drawn by maybe Catholic priests, right? So I think that art is one of the ultimate practices that humans have come up with, and it is primal to humans, as we find as we keep seeing new petroglyphs show up in caves that they uncover. This is that people have expressed what is in their environment since the beginning of people. And so it's primary to us, it's essential to passing on the knowledge from one generation to the next for identifying and preserving what is so in a society and seeing things from a different perspective when you think about abstract artists, for instance. So I'm doing a series, for instance, right now that I call glyphs, and they were these marks and drawings and hieroglyphic type shapes that I've been doing for a long time. And they would just be decorative on maybe around the edges of a shelf or something like that. And I was reading something that said that in every war, the people who die the most are women and children. That was astounding to me because all we ever hear about the fatalities of is of the soldiers. So when you hear
Mm,
how many soldiers died, and now you read that more women and children died,
mm,
wow, that is amazing. And all of a sudden, these glyphs transformed themselves into a language that was from a matriarchal and matrilineal society. As I started
Mm,
reading about those societies, none of them ever have wars.
mm,
Men work hard to attract women and to be beautiful and strong and show that they can make good babies and that they have stamina and high cheekbones and clear, bright eyes and strong teeth, like that's what's valued. And in this language, in this society I've created, there is no word for war. There is no word for rape. There there's the thing called the arts instead of a religion, and though the arts are a completely different set of principles than what we typically look at in what I feel are mostly male generated religions in our societies.
mm, mm. So interesting. And in terms of art, and you touched on it in value, and I mean, in as an artist, because I work with a lot of freelancers, a lot of people in the creative industries who are freelancers, and one of the things that people find difficult is to ask for money or ask for salary increases or ask. And what you said, oops, what you said there was about, always making sure that you get paid for something, you get paid something for your work. But how do you how do you go about, what's your approach to valuing your work and getting, establishing a value for it?
One of the first things is, especially with my furniture designs, is the cost of production. So that definitely has to be covered. All the material costs, or if I have fabricators I'm working with, that definitely has to be covered immediately. When I was with my furniture design work, I want my design fee and to be all mine for sure. And then when I give a price to my client, I usually ask for 2/3 up front. That half of that, so 1/3 of that actually will cover the full cost of the piece, and then I get paid the other third while it's being created, because I'm having to go back and forth to the shop, working with the craftspeople, making adjustments, you know, s making sure my vision and my drawings are being translated into three-dimensional objects that are how I view them. Because I'm primarily working with men in these shops, and they sometimes get excited and they want to take over the thing, and I have to stay in charge of my creativity. And then the last is to pay me. Now that's money off the top. So the it starts off with how much it's going to cost me to produce it, and I'm working with gold leaf and you know even with the mirror that you bought from me, someone had to make that frame for me, and I have to have beveled mirrors. I can't have flat mirrors. Beveled mirrors to me speak quality, even though they're little. The mirror is really so insignificant in those mirrors. It's really about the frames more. And so that's part of it. And it took me hours when I sit down and sort those stamps. I go to stamp shops and I buy whole packages, and then I'm breaking them out into what I consider categories: all cars, all plants, whatever. And then I make a subject matter for that particular mirror in those cases. And a lot of the pieces, the big pieces, somebody's got to carve those legs for that Zulu Renaissance writing table. Another person is practically a Renaissance painter herself, and she can replicate those eyes of those Renaissance paintings from the Mona Lisa exactly around that edge. And then I have a person who's gold leafing it. So all of those people have to be paid before I can even get that piece back. So all of their costs have to come out of that. And then I have a percentage that I think I should be paid. So
Yeah, yeah,
it was really about what it costs to make the piece and how much time it takes me to do it. And it was just it was really just arithmetic, just mathematics, you know.
Yeah, that makes
With
sense. That
other
makes
works,
complete
so
sense.
with fine art, you can, I think it's about the venue in which work is sold. In a gallery, is going to add a markup to things. There's a little bit more prestige around that showing in that surrounding, so that can provide more. But I don't know. I kind of go with my gut. At this point, I can go with my gut. I'm doing a prints now. I've been doing some limited edition prints, and so all of the print costs, I want that covered. And then every time I sell one, I want to also still be making some money off of them. So
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, brilliant. That's like your diffusion line almost, like the what's it called? Haute couture and pret-a-porter.
hmm hmm hmm
A little bit, yeah.
yeah,
And
it
so,
is.
Cheryl, what I mean, we talked a little bit about the very real career obstacles that you had, or obstacles in your life. You know, when you think back over a very successful career, what were the biggest obstacles, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest obstacles were typically perception of a woman, of a black woman. You know, I think that was a lot of the time. So I'll give you an example. When I worked at the largest advertising agency in San Francisco, I got that job because my boyfriend in college was going to University of Missouri School of Journalism, and I did his homework with him. And I ended up getting a job in advertising before he did, and he broke up with me because he was so angry about that. But I was working on the two biggest accounts at the agency as an assistant account executive, and then I got promoted to being an account executive on that largest account. Um, and the smaller account I wasn't. One of my accounts was Barclays Bank of California, which it was a British bank, and most of the team that we worked with, the client side, were British as well. I don't know, maybe they came to the table with a different point of view. But when the gentleman left our team who had been managing their account, uh, I still was kept as an assistant account executive, and I took over his job and was managing their account. And finally, the lady who was the head of that team went to the management at my company, and she wanted to understand, why hasn't Cheryl been promoted to account executive? She's actually doing a better job than John, or whatever the guy's name was that had left. And she wanted to know, what weren't they valued? Why would you have an assistant account executive managing our account? And so I got called into the office. I mean, and everyone was there, the whole team, the management, and everybody was like this big deal. I was like, oh my God, what happened? What did I do? And they said, Cheryl, we have great news for you. We're going to promote you. You're going to be, and this lady told me she had done this. And they said, we're going to make you account executive on Barclays, but you will still be assistant account executive on Hyperion Computer and Almond and Wine. And I, to this day, don't know where I got the the power to say what I said next, because they expected me to be really excited, grateful, and accept that. And I said, well, that's lovely news, but I'm going to wait until you think I am of the quality to just be an account executive. Because in my 5 years working here, I've never seen anyone have both of those titles. You're either an account executive or you're not, you know. I said, so when you feel I'm up to par, I'll wait until that. Because I said, I won't know what card to give people when we're out on new business. They give, do I give them assistant accounting executive? So I left, and their faces were like, but it just showed how unconscious they were of their own racism and sexism, that they would
Yeah.
even say that or do that. I even had a woman management manager of the account of the advertising department I worked at for a fashion brand do the same thing. Tell me that, oh, I've been interviewing. I like this guy. And since he's a guy, I can get more money for him. So I think we'll be able to get him, and so those kinds of things is what really stuck with me about being paid what your value is. And so when I came to work the next day at the ad agency, of course, when they cleared their fog out of their brains of their way of being, they realized, yes, this is ridiculous. Why would we even say something like that? And of course, they gave me the title. But also they were under threat of losing the second biggest account of the agency. So,
Yes.
they didn't want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
they didn't want to,
Yeah.
upset the client. But also they realized
Yeah.
too that that didn't make any sense. And I think a
Yeah.
lot
And
of it
and
is
I mean, like,
unconscious.
a lot of it's unconscious, and thank heavens for that lady who called it out as well. We need more people to amplify the the effects of bias or sexism, racism, etc. So kudos to her for actually
I'm
calling it
sure
out,
she
and
had
amazing that you got
I'm sure she
and
had gone
amazing that
through
you
things
had.
like that in her career as well. I think that may have been why she was conscious of it, don't you think, as well? At
Yes,
that
yes,
time,
maybe, yeah,
Yeah, we're talking maybe 30 years ago, so I'm sure.
yeah. And what do you think, when you look at your vast career, what do you think the hardest lesson is that you've learned? The hardest lesson learned?
Hmm. To be resilient, uh, I don't think that I plan enough for retirement because as an artist, I've seen so many creative people who are still in the studio the day before they die. And so I never thought I would stop working, but I think I should have planned a little bit more for that. Um, so yeah, but I think that what to me is one of my greatest legacies is the help that I have given to young artists, other emerging artists, and the contribution I've been to the elevation of artists of the Black African diaspora. I was lucky enough to be on some boards of museums, the San Francisco Museum and the American Craft Council, and now what's called the Museum of Art and Design. And in those places, I was also on the board of the first artist residency, site specific artist residency in America. And in those places, as we were reviewing artists that considering, I would bring up the point that there were no Black artists being considered. And I wanted to know, were there no Black artists in the entire world that were qualified to have that? And now many of those artists are the most famous Black artists in the world. And so I feel really great about having made that contribution and also getting more African Americans to purchase Black art also because it was not going in our homes. And I know that I was not surrounded other than whatever few things my mother would have had that she made in the house. But the paintings that we had were like we had Chinese figurines and things like that. We didn't have things that reflected us in our lives, and so that's become very important to me. And so I have a lot of young people, young Black artists that I mentor, and just
Yeah.
yes, and it comes back to you. Guess what? Just yesterday, I gave a lecture for a class, and a young Black man young boy who had sent me his resume asked me if I would critique it and give him some advice, and I did that. And he goes back to his professor and tells her all about me, and says that he thinks I should be one of the guest speakers. And yesterday I did that, and I got paid for that. And I asked for a pay. And the professor goes, "Well, typically our speakers don't get paid, but we do have a budget for it." And I thought, "Well, I'll take it." But I just did that
Yeah.
as I didn't expect anything when I did it for the young man. And I do this all the time. But the other side of it is they're digital natives and they are constantly helping me to stay up to date because things are changing constantly in the digital world. And so, where I have all of these years of experience, I can help them with their contracts with galleries. I can talk to them about pricing their work, or give them ideas of new media to work with. Just anything that I can be a contribution. I'm getting a lot back, and a lot of my friends who are my age, they're like, "How do you know how to do that?" And I said, "I have digital native friends, and you need to make some too, because this is a different world now. The elders are not the experts anymore. You need a 12-year-old in your life. You need somebody 15 years old."
And Cheryl, you are a board member and a board advisor. You've mentioned of so many things. Now traditionally there aren't a lot of women on boards, and there aren't a lot of women of color on boards. And for women, I think on boards, one of the things that come up is how to be seen and heard. The classic tale is that a woman will say something and they'll be like tumbleweed, like nobody will hear it. And then a man will say the same thing and everybody will go, oh my God, that's such a great idea. But what tips do you have from your experience of being on boards like that, in being heard and seen?
Well, I definitely have had that experience in the corporate world of saying something at a meeting, and then the guy says it and later, and everybody jumps on it. But on the boards, when they bring me on the boards now, they really do want to hear my input. They need to have the voice of a woman, of a Black person, and that is why they actually have me there. So that's why I've been able to be impactful. I have to say that when I've said, after we've reviewed a bunch of artists being presented to us by a curator or by the director of, when it's a nonprofit, and I go, isn't there one Black artist in the whole world? Because, like Cap Street Project was that's eligible and qualified to be. It's a surprise. It's not that people are consciously uh, ignoring us and excluding us. They just didn't even think about it. It's just it's so it's so embedded in the culture that it's not even acknowledged by those who are doing it. And that's why people can go, I'm not racist. And maybe on a conscious and way they're not, but in their actions they are. And so then they go out and they're so excited, and it actually, all the time, it brings more energy and excitement to the program when they bring in these different voices and different
Yeah,
points of views and different medias that a different type of artist will make. And I'll make these statements about for women as well. But definitely, I can get a double whack pack. I can get a woman who's Black or a woman who's Asian, into these things. And it has enriched the art world of America. It has enriched the art
yeah,
world of Great Britain to have artists of the Black African diaspora be the art stars of today. I mean, look at the work that's being done by these people. It's wonderful.
yeah,
It's unbelievable.
yeah. Yeah, wonderful. And one of the things that a lot of the listeners of this podcast worry about us is selling themselves, you know, marketing themselves, talking about themselves, so selling themselves fearlessly. And that's something that you've had to do, yeah,
Mhm.
for years. What is your approach and advice to selling yourself and getting yourself out there?
Well, I think that, I mean, there are certain artists I know who are not so great at that, and they have very good careers, but they were lucky enough to be discovered by a gallery, or sometimes they're married to somebody who is great at that. More often, oftentimes that's the case, because sometimes the kind of contemplative and deep thinking personality that is required to do certain types of art isn't the person who can be a front person and who can talk about. But I have to say, now so many artists are going to graduate school where they have to defend their work and they have to talk about their work, and they're so much more eloquent than I am. I Again, young artists, a lot of times I have them review my artist statements, and they help me add in a little what I call art speak, which which is ear candy to the curators, and the way things are expressed is very important, and the metaphors that are used and things like that. So I've gotten better at it because the kids have been teaching me how to do it. But it's who is good at everything, right? Nobody is in any, but people expect artists to do everything. Why do we have marketing companies if everybody could do everything, right? Why would you need that? So there are more and more, especially those who have MFA artists who are articulate, who do understand their value and who do know how to talk about their work. They know how to hold back some of the best pieces for themselves and wait as their careers get better to release those pieces. They know strategies better. And so it's becoming more, it's always been a business. It's just that not all the time did the artists benefit as much as they should have from it. The galleries did, the collectors did, but maybe the artists didn't get what they should have. But I think that that's changing a lot. And because art is
Yeah,
becoming so much more popular culture now, from the Keith Harings and the Basquiats and the graffiti artists who now take it off the walls and are putting it on canvases, that
yeah,
that is changing the whole. They've disrupted the structure of how the art
yeah,
world operated, and they're
yeah,
getting better and better at that. The artists are recognizing that they need to be able to talk about their work, but if they don't, like a
yeah.
person like Martin Puryear, he doesn't say much about his work. He doesn't talk a lot, but the work speaks for him. And
So it speaks for
yeah,
himself.
and
Yeah.
he's smart enough to have been surrounded, and from his childhood on, his creativity was supported. So he has confidence
Mm,
in that. His parents actually created their whole basement for him as a workshop. So his brother is
yeah.
a cabinet maker, woodworker, fine furniture, and Martin Puryear is one of the greatest sculptors in the world today.
Wow. Okay, that's a top tip there. Get buying. And um, Cheryl, I guess in life and work, how do you personally measure success?
Hmm. Well, I don't know if I am a success. I don't have six figures in the bank, and I think I would feel more of a success if I had a lot of money. But on other levels, I feel I am a success. In the contribution I've been to other people's lives, I feel I've been a tremendous success, and that gives me a lot of pleasure. And in the fact that I am doing what I was gifted to do and I get paid to do it. Because there are a lot of people who paint and who are artists who make no money from that. That's like they consider it more of a hobby, and they could be very, very talented people. So it took a while for me to get into it where I'm just really living as a fine artist. But even that's not true because I still am doing the modeling. I still do the for the ads and things, and acting and stuff. So I I don't know. I just feel that I go with the flow. And when an avenue opens up to me, and if it feels that water feels warm and it feels good and it's going at the right speed, then I go into it. I wade on in. Not every opportunity that it comes to me do I take. It has to feel right, and the people who are part of it have to have the right spirit and energy for me to pour my spirit into it, because then my creativity gets blocked if it's not in the right pool, if it's not in the right space.
Yeah. Beautiful. Go with the flow and go where the avenues take you. And also, yeah, you just that success in the legacy that you've given, not only in your own work, but also really empowered and elevated so many other people who might never have ever had the opportunity. It's very powerful. And then just to
I
finish
don't
off with,
know.
do
I
you
think
have a
they were
kind of
so
Oops.
I don't know. I want to say that I think they were so talented. It probably would have come at some point or with someone else, maybe. I don't want to take too much credit because a talent is a talent. And if it hadn't been they crossed my path, they would have crossed somebody's path. I think that would have seen it because they just really were very talented people.
Okay, that's very modest. It's very modest. You've opened up the door. You've nudged it open. And Cheryl, finally, do you have a motto to live by? Like, do you follow a particular saying or a line of wisdom?
I I don't know if I have one motto, but I know that what I like to do is I like to be open and follow my dreams and stay active and in the stream. um, Live in the time I'm in and not try to be in the past. Like this is what's happening now. Get with the program now. Like I said, like being with technically savvy. You and I couldn't be speaking right now if I didn't stay with what's happening now. I like to follow my dreams. I like to be open to possibilities, um, but to honor my natural talents. I like to give back in the ways that I'm capable of giving back, and I like to surround myself with loving and supportive friends.
Beautiful.
So I don't know if that's a motto,
Beautiful.
but that's those are the rules I live by.
The rules you live by. They're absolutely beautiful. So, Cheryl, I've learned so much. It's been so inspiring. And I love, I mean, that's just an hour of your story. I feel like you could do a whole podcast just with the Cheryl Riley story and the words of wisdom that you've got. But I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your pearls of wisdom with us. I'm really, really grateful to you. Thank you very, very
And
much.
thank you too, Tracy, for who you've been and the support that you've been. And that was very supportive of you to buy one of my mirrors early on. So I really appreciate it. And you stayed present in my life. And I so much appreciate that.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, it's still one of my most treasured possessions, and I see it every single day. It's in my bedroom, so
Cool.
I always have it in my eyesight.
That makes
Yeah.
me so happy.
All right. Thank you.